The Phoenix Suns are open to trading Kevin Durant or Devin Booker this offseason. That actually is a change to what we heard earlier near the trade deadline. We're going to talk about it all and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host here, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. This one comes from Dwayne Rankin of AZ Central, who talks about the Phoenix Suns and what they could be looking back in returns for Kevin Durant or Devin Booker. He says this: sources inform the Republic the most ideal return on Durant trade is regaining 3 first-round picks and a younger player as part of a multi-team deal tied to getting under the second tax apron. Sources also inform the Republic that the Suns could probably get 4 first-round picks for Booker and a rising star in its 3rd or 4th year. Now, this is the latest that we hear from the Suns on them trying to figure out how to untangle the mess that they made of their roster, of their franchise, and of their current situation. They are so far into the second tax apron that it's completely limited anything that they could do. And then reportedly that there were deals that could have been made at this trade deadline, but due to Devin Booker's non-desire to waive his no-trade clause, those deals weren't able to materialize and surface. Now, we all know and expect the Phoenix Suns to be making a move this offseason to move off of Kevin Durant. Now, this latest seems like there's some thought process that the Suns could move off of Kevin Durant or Devin Booker, which seems a little surprising there, which I thought they were going to try to rebuild something around Devin Booker. Now, the Phoenix Suns, if they're looking for multiple first-round picks and a young player back, I kind of think that market for that, I get it that they've heard that's something that they feel that can be done there. I don't know how much I believe that, to be honest with you. Now, that's not to say or to knock Kevin Durant, the talent that he is, or anything like that. Like, Kevin Durant is still an absolute monster. But when you look at it, teams that are interested in Kevin Durant, it depends on what you look at as a young talent, right? Like, we've heard recently that the Minnesota Timberwolves are expected to re-enter the Kevin Durant sweepstakes this summer. That came from Brian Windhorst of ESPN. He said this: another small market team to watch, the Minnesota Timberwolves, which Ant Edwards and KD have a very tight connection. Also from the Olympics, the Timberwolves try to pull off a crazy trade at the deadline for KD. Look for them to revisit those talks this summer. Now, when you look at, for example, the Minnesota Timberwolves, if they are a team that's expected to try to be in on a Kevin Durant trade, they don't necessarily have the assets that you would think to try to make that move. Now, they did get trades assets back, and they definitely could include some. But I think when you look at it, like, the Timberwolves are a really good situation for Kevin Durant if they truly do look to move on or make that move to try to get Kevin Durant and pair him with Anthony Edwards. It would make a lot of sense for the franchise of the Minnesota Timberwolves. You look at what they have, after this year, even in 2025, they could potentially have Detroit Pistons pick, which is protected 1 through 13. The Detroit Pistons look pretty damn good. Looks like that pick is probably gonna, we'll see what happens there. The Detroit Pistons actually keep their pick if it's 1 through 13. Have to be 14 through 30 for the Minnesota Timberwolves to get it. So we'll see what happens there. The Minnesota Timberwolves also have Utah Jazz's pick this year, right? The least favorable of the Cleveland pick. So we'll see what happens there. And then they also have their own first-round pick, a potential pick swap with Minnesota. So they don't really have all the first-round picks reportedly that the Phoenix Suns are going to look for. Now, they did say it's part of a multi-team trade. That's the part that makes this a little bit more interesting, right? Is that if you're looking at multiple teams getting involved because of the ability to dump salaries off, include other picks from other teams because you're dumping salaries off other places, that could be a route that ends up going there. But either way, the Phoenix Suns find themselves in a situation where, after trying to put together a second super team, right, and move on from Chris Paul and those players to try to put something together with Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker, you're now talking about us after the second season of that, right, coming together, now moving on from that. And it's just, I've said it before and I've said it many times, the Phoenix Suns really are the perfect example of why the second tax apron, you have to be so sure of the roster that you have before you go into that second tax apron, because if you're not and you need to pivot or it doesn't work out, you're screwed. And that is a technical term. Thank you very much. They're screwed, right? And that's where the Phoenix Suns find themselves at. That now, at a time where you can't aggregate salaries, right? So now you're looking for a move to try to come out of that second tax apron, so then you can have more flexibility in further moves, but you may take an initial hit. You got to get other pieces involved, but you can still only do 1-for-1 trades, right? You can't aggregate salaries. And that's not going to change this offseason either by the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are still at a base going into the offseason, $11 million over the second tax apron, right? They're slated right now next year to have a tax bill of $165 million. So yes, it behooves them to get under the second tax apron. And you may have to move a generational player like Kevin Durant to get that done. And we'll see what happens here. Like, you got some other teams that are coming out of it, right? For example, like recently Mark Stein said that the Mavs really aren't going to be involved or interested in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes, right? And that's something that also makes some sense for that team. So the Phoenix Suns, and we haven't even talked about the Devin Booker aspect of things yet, right? Like Devin Booker, a player that by all stretch, the Phoenix Suns want to keep. He was drafted there. He's developed there. They want to try to keep him and try to build and regain something on the fly. But you could look to have to move Devin Booker as well in his $49 million contract, $53 million next season, to try to get assets back so you can have some shape, form of an actual future. And I still think that that's the best case scenario, right? Like, I would love to be able to say that they can hold on to Devin Booker. I know that they would love to be able to hold on to Devin Booker. But the chances of that and building something that is a threat in the West or even a playing team, right, is slim to none. And so, maybe there's a deal out there that I'm not seeing. There's always something that materializes in the offseason that's kind of unexpected and catches the NBA world off guard. And maybe, just maybe, the Phoenix Suns can be a beneficiary of that. But as it stands up right now, man, it doesn't look likely. And the Suns are between ownership, right? And I know there have been some people that say, well, at least ownership was willing to make a move and take a chance. Yeah, but if you take a dumbass chance, well, how much of a chance did you really take? Did that benefit you at all? Right? That's the question that you have to ask. What do the Phoenix Suns really benefit from this experiment? What do they benefit from it? A lot of nothing, right? A lot of nothing. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of where it is. Until the Phoenix Suns are actually able to be on a path to where, again, keep in mind, this is a team that was in the NBA Finals, yo. This was a team that looked like it was on the uptick, that made the moves that they made to hopefully get over the hump. And all it's done is it's made them the hump. They are the hump. That is what this has turned into. They are the hump right now. And unfortunately, wherever it's going to go, man, is where it's going to go. And we'll see what the future does hold for this Phoenix Suns team. And that is what it is. But another thing I want to talk about today is the MVP race. Now, on one of our most recent episodes, we talked about the initial matchup between Shai and Jokic and the big game that Shai had and Jokic had as well with his 30-point triple-double that he had. That was crazy. 30, 20, and 20 game, which was absolutely wild. You then had a 40-point performance by Shai against the Denver Nuggets that, some people try to make out to be what could separate Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in that MVP race. And then Jokic turns around and they have the game that they have a huge fourth quarter by the Denver Nuggets in that game where they just figured it out, right? They forced the OKC Thunder to be a bad shooting team where they shot efficiently, and it really kind of exposed that. This MVP race is getting really interesting, though, because of the narrative around it for the fans, right? You have the people on the side of it that, rightfully so, look at the season that Jokic is having, one of the best seasons in NBA history. There's just no way that you can take out of that. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is having an amazing season. And some people make the conversation and say, well, what Shai's doing we've seen before. We've never seen what Jokic has done before, right? And then you offer in other aspects of it, like the team record that plays into it. How well do head-to-head matchups play into it, right? And then you people have the conversation of the defense of Shai. Is the defense of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which is amazing, is that enough to separate himself from Jokic? And when we're seeing Jokic have one of the best seasons of NBA history, right? And as the season goes on, right, whether recency bias is a thing, voter fatigue being a thing that shouldn't be a thing. I want to be clear here. I know that shouldn't be a thing, but I do think it is. I think we've seen it in MVP voting before. We have seen the fact that voting fatigue is a thing. It has been a thing, right? Now, we can have a conversation on if it should or should not, and that's a fair conversation to have, but regardless, it is a thing. the MVP race between these two players, and I do think it's come down to those two. I think Giannis has been great, and he should be third in MVP voting, but Shai and Jokic have completely separated themselves, in my opinion, in this conversation. And as long as that continues to be the case, I just don't know. Listen, Jokic has said that he's playing the best basketball of his life. And when you judge that against the other seasons that Jokic has had, right? And then there's a legitimate conversation to be made. Well, if he won MVP and this is the best season that he's had in his lifetime, why shouldn't he be MVP again, right? And you have your radicals, right? I've gotten into my conversations in the comment sections with Jokic fans, and I understand that they're listen, we've defended Jokic here before, right? Like, people who say that Jokic plays a boring brand of basketball, to me, are people that I don't want to have basketball conversations with, right? When you look at everything that goes into the game of basketball and how much Jokic does and how effortless he makes it look, you cannot take away from what Jokic has done and what he continues to do. Then you look at Shai, right, and all the adaptability. And the thing that I know a lot of people also point out about Shai, they say, well, even if you take Shai off that team is still a really great team. But here's the thing. Shai doesn't miss a lot of games, right? So even the fact that you say that you're using a very small sample size with that, but even with that said, like, there's something to be said about the durability of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as well, with the fact that we don't even have to really have that conversation as much because Shai plays, and he plays a whole hell of a lot. And that's not to take away from anything else, right? But that also weighs into a part of the conversation. How durable Shai has been over the course of his basketball career. That plays a role into all of this as well. And you can't say that it shouldn't, because durability should be a thing, right? So when you look at judging an MVP race, right? Of course, the individual performances matter. I think that the performances against the upper echelon teams, how they rank, head-to-head matchups, that's a bit of a difficult place to get into with head-to-head matchups because players play such different roles and different positions, right? But, you get into that as well. But I think when you look at this, right, and you look at the performances of these two guys, we're seeing two guys that legitimately have a case. Now, not have a case, that you can legitimately, like, either one who walks away from MVP, there's going to be more than enough reasons why. And there's also going to be more than enough conversations why the other guy should win MVP, right? And so this is one of the most fun conversations to have around basketball right now, where no matter what side of the fence that you end up on, right, whether it's the efficiency of Jokic, right, the 40% from three, the way that he's impacting, the on-off splits when Jokic is on the court versus when he's off the court for the Denver Nuggets team, you cannot make any argument that he maybe uplifts the ceiling of a team more than anybody else for their team in the game of basketball. But it is still an individual award as well, right? So you still want to weigh also the individual performance and what Shai does as well. Like I said, there's a legitimate conversation to be had here either way, right? And so as we go forth into the rest of the season to see how this season is going to end with this conversation, who's the MVP? Jokic? Is it Shai? I'm just saying this. Let's have fun in the sense that we get to watch and have a conversation about these two guys, and legitimately, they both have huge cases for why they should be the MVP of this league. Both have huge cases on why they should be MVP, and they're both having tremendous, amazing seasons. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is leading the league in scoring, but also with that, he's also a amazing defender, right? And somebody in the comment section the other day was like, well, Shai winning the MVP would be comparable to Steve Nash winning, and I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, all jokes aside, anybody who, like, and that's the thing that we try to have more kind of fleshed out conversations here, because to me, you knocking one to make a case for the other actually hurts the conversation around this. It actually is not doing justice to the conversation around these two players. Both these players should be talked about in positive lights. And then you highlight the positives versus the other positives, not try to knock one for why one shouldn't be in the conversation for whatever type of arbitrary. Make no mistake about it. No matter what, it's arbitrary between these two players because they're both playing amazingly well. But to say something as stupid as, oh, well, Shai's winning MVP would be comparable to Steve Nash winning the MVP, that was literally one of the most stupidest things that I have ever read in my life of covering basketball, right? So, we'll see what this story goes, but this is such a fun season, but partly because of these two players having legitimate cases for the MVP. And we'll see where that shakes out, man. And overall, who comes out on top, because I know one way or another, there are going to be so many arguments afterwards as well. But thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following us at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. We'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.